Welcome to the People's National Congress Reform for June 22nd, 2022. Welcome to the members of the media and those who are following us online. Today's panel, we have with us none other than Central Exec member, Rear Admiral retired Mr. Gary Best, and alongside him is economist Mr. Elson Lowe. Economist Mr. Elson Lowe. Welcome to our press conference. Today's press statement will be read in two parts, and we will begin with that reading by Mr. Elson Lowe.
The PNCR calls on civil society to act in the interest of the people. Now that the Vice News feature, Guyana for Sale and Moors Rising, has been aired, the PNCR joins with many Guyanese locally and in the diaspora in expressing repulsion and outrage over the allegations made against Vice President Jagdeo. What has emerged is evidence of VP Bharat Jagdeo's abuse of public office and public trust. The Vice News report raises serious concerns about the VP as alleged involvement in bribery and corruption and warrants an investigation. Civil society has a crucial role to play in ensuring transparency, accountability, and respect for the rule of law. In this regard, the PNCR expects that civil society organizations, such as the trade unions, advocacy groups, and the private sector, will honor their obligation to the people of Guyana and ensure this matter is investigated by credible investigators and let the law take its course. We wait in anticipation of their position on this matter of critical importance to our nation. As an oil-producing country in which the resources from oil need to be accounted for, civil society cannot be silent on this critical issue. To remain silent is to foster the culture of unaccountability, embezzlement, and self-aggrandizement by the PPP government. To remain silent is to encourage the continued damage to our country's image as an investment destination. To remain silent is to tolerate the rape of our national patrimony at a time when Guyanese continue to struggle with the growing cost of living and with putting food on the table for their families. The PNCR therefore calls on civil society organizations to join the call for VP Jagdeo to resign or be removed from office to allow a full and independent investigation into the matter. Apart from allegations of outright corruption, what is also of grave concern is the fact that the Vice President can meet with potential foreign investors for the first time in his living room. At the behest of his so-called tenant, Mr. Su, and for the VP to readily offer the government's full support to what appears to be underhand deals brokered by Mr. Su. This cannot be treated as nothing. No amount of PPP damage control can change the minds of many Guyanese who see the Su affair as a greedy and corrupt scheme to ensure the PPP's elite, friends, and family continue to enrich themselves at the expense of our people. In a democratic society with a decent government, that would have been enough for a minister to demit office in shame. But democracy and decency are not in the DNA of the PPP. The PPP is an undemocratic outfit that plunders the resources of our people and does not respond to the will of the people. Only through relentless pressure from citizens, inclusive of civil society, will the PPP and Jagdeo understand that it cannot be business as usual. PPP and Jagdeo must overcome their ignorance on fuel subsidies. Not surprisingly, Bharat Jagdeo has criticized our proposal to bring down and stabilize gas prices as cake shop economics. Given that the PPP has no plan to combat historically high gas prices, this grasping at straws is not surprising. Bharat and the PPP have openly admitted that nothing more can be done. This is an outright admission of failure. No serious government, much less an oil producer, would abandon its people to potentially far higher oil prices. This would not be done without considering further measures. The PPP doesn't care for the people of Guyana. They are focused on making themselves, families, and friends rich at the expense of the people of Guyana. In fact, they are so bankrupt of ideas that their only response is the flimsy criticism that compensating suppliers will be too difficult to implement. Our plan is simple. If the oil price is above a predetermined level, importers will be compensated for the difference in cost above that predetermined price. By absorbing this cost, government can ensure that the price of fuel is kept stable when it reaches the customer. This approach should even be extended to other oil and gas industry products, like cooking gas, which has undergone a similarly punishing price spike. Is this so hard for the PPP to grasp? In fact, Mexico has committed to doing exactly what we suggest, leveraging additional revenues from the oil price spike to bring fuel costs down domestically. Instead of throwing empty insults, the government should focus on dealing with these high oil prices head-on. Alternatively, they can ask us for ideas. In addition to compensating suppliers, the cost of living can be further reduced by providing fuel vouchers to minibus drivers, farmers, and canter operators to ensure they do not pass the rising cost of fuel on to hard-pressed Guyanese consumers. This is a policy approach being adopted already in the Philippines. This will reduce the cost of a wide range of local produce, ensuring the tragedy of Guyanese skipping meals to combat surging food prices does not persist. Of course, for such a scheme to be successful, the PPP will have to eschew its policy of discrimination and develop a transparent and accountable system to ensure the vouchers arrive at the intended target group and not in the hands of PPP activists and cronies, as happened with the COVID-19 cash grants. The real challenge for the PPP is their inability and unwillingness to serve our people. They see every scheme as a means of self-aggrandizement. It is unfortunate, but it is true. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elson Lowe, for that. And at this time, the other part of the statement will be read by Rear Admiral, retired Mr. Gary Beth.
Thank you very much. The President's decision to set up a commission of inquiry into the 2020 general and regional elections is a clear indication that it is aimed at distracting people from the alleged bribery and corruption scandal involving the embattled Vice President, and to put stumbling blocks in the way of the petitions which the PPP knows will succeed. While the nation grapples with the shame and fallout from the Sue affair and the expected resignation of the VP and an independent investigation into those allegations, it is important for the citizens not to lose sight of the more important issue, the hearing of the election petitions. The PNCR therefore reiterates its call for a speedy and unhindered hearing of these election petitions via the judicial process that is far superior to that of a commission of inquiry. Further, there is no need for a parallel non-binding process that has no judicial finality. The PNCR wishes to remind the nation that the opposition has already called on GCOM to conduct an independent inquiry, GCOM being the independent body responsible to conduct elections in Guyana. GCOM has thus far failed to conduct that internal review. Surely, this constitutional body has a duty to the citizenry to act impartially and provide answers. One wonders why the resistance from GCOM. The PNCR therefore views the setting up of a commission of inquiry as a clear attempt to hoodwink the Guyanese public by introducing a process which is of less judicial value than the very election petitions. It is important to note also that a commission of inquiry is not a court of law. Our own Commission of Inquiry Act allows for hearsay evidence. It allows for accusations of misconduct being made without any built-in rules of natural justice or procedural fairness to safeguard the rights and interests of people who might be so affected. We have seen this before with previous COIs. In the case of this petition, it is a legal process in which evidence is considered and the decisions of the court are binding in law on the parties to it. Obviously, the PPP's intention is to smear the character and reputation of persons who would be adverse to them in the election petitions. Therefore, a commission of inquiry cannot provide any judicial finality to the Guyanese citizens on electoral malpractices during the 2020 general and regional elections. The petitions can and will. The PNCR also reminds the President and the citizens that his PPP government is a party to the election petitions for cause, and his decision to commission an inquiry into a matter that he and his government are involved in smacks of national contempt for the elections judicial process. The PNCR therefore reiterates its call for the constitutional GCOM body to conduct an independent review, which GCOM has done in the past, on how the system worked during the 2020 general and regional elections, to identify flaws and weaknesses. Such a process does not run counter to the election petitions. Be that as it may, as the President has insisted on being a judge in his own cause, then the PNCR demands that the government and opposition agree on finalizing the terms of reference, if only to reduce potential bias and expose the nation to the plethora of evidence on electoral malpractice by the PPP in the recently concluded 2020 general and regional elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, we will be taking questions from the media. As usual, you'll raise your hands, and once the go-ahead is given, you will be able to ask your question by stating your name and your news entity. Today's press conference will be taking questions based on the statement I see the hands of News Talk Radio. You can go ahead.
Rear Admiral, Best Dennis Shabral, News Talk Radio, Demerara. Sir, could you elaborate a bit on how do you foresee the consultation in terms of reference dealing with some of your concerns? At the end of the day, should it be the commissioners who will ensure that there is a stable hand and a balanced approach to the acquisition of any evidence, memoranda, and other material?
Well, Dennis, let me say to you that the party's position is very clear in that we recognize the Commission of Inquiry as an interference in the judicial process of the election petitions. So for us, the fact that there is a Commission of Inquiry which is under the hand of the President, and at the same time the President's party is to be investigated in a judicial process and the process of the Commission of Inquiry, to us, that speaks to the fact that only one side will be preparing the evidentiary processes for the Commission of Inquiry. So we therefore suggest strongly to the President and to the commissioners that in the interest of fairness and justice, the government and opposition should determine along with the commissioners what are these terms of reference, lest the entire process become another sham like the Sue affair.
Would you be formally writing them asking for this process to be put in place?
More than likely, with further discussions within the party, one can expect a document reaching the commission in this regard.
Alternatively, what legal scope is there to stop the Commission of Inquiry in light of your concerns?
Let me not speak on any specific legal scope. However, let me say that there's nothing that prevents legal action. Nothing technically prevents legal action, because you go to the court and the court finally decides whether or not your action was grounded properly or not. I think what is important here is to recognize that GCOM is the body responsible for conducting elections in Guyana. It is that body that should be doing an internal review to determine what went wrong with the elections. When you look to a process to cast blame, a process that identifies misconduct, that process you're looking for is not a commission of inquiry, because there is a judicial process that brings finality. So the two processes, as the party is concerned, should be GCOM doing an internal review to determine what went wrong, and the courts taking a natural course with the election petitions. The commission of inquiry, any reasonable Guyanese, any reasonable person will conclude, is an interference, because it is the lowest level of judicial authority and scrutiny. Why introduce that now? Why introduce it at all? So we call on GCOM to step back again, look at the Constitution, look at your role, look back at your own Order 60, have an Order 70 if necessary. Go and deal with the fairness of the process and conduct that internal inquiry. There will be no need for a commission of inquiry. Having said that, the party is of the view that if the president stubbornly goes ahead, then the government and opposition must determine those terms of reference in an essence to have fairness and impartiality in this process.
My final question, Rear Admiral, is: does the coalition have anything to worry about should the commission of inquiry go ahead in light of, well, you've made allegations about the process the government or the governing party has made, but do you have anything to fear about your alleged role in electoral malpractice in 2020?
Well, certainly not, because this commission of inquiry, as I understand it, is into the general elections, not into the Pncr, not into the coalition, not into the WPA, but into the entire electoral process. So it'll have to be calling persons from the PPP, the WPA, and all the parties before it. If, however, as you suggest, or infer, or not infer, that this is now an inquiry only by which they'll only be calling persons from the PNC, then obviously it becomes a witch hunt. So to answer your question, we have no fear whatsoever. There was a recount process. The information went into the public domain, and the information will be returned into the public domain via this commission of inquiry. It is very clear to us in the courts and in the court of public opinion what occurred during that elections. And at this point in time, because there's a judicial process, I say nothing further on the judicial process, but we are prepared to attend the commission of inquiry if it is forced upon us and present the evidence robustly through our attorneys and our contributions, and demonstrate that the coalition and the People's National Congress reform did not commit the errors and the accusations laid against it. But otherwise than that, you'll find it was the PPP.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Adam Harris.
Yes. Good morning, Rear Admiral. Good morning, Shamika. No, sir, there is this sub judice thing and all of this. There's an election petition before the court. What impact will the COI have on this petition, bearing in mind that evidence could be presented at the COI, evidence that has not yet been presented in a court of law?
Well, Adam, our lawyers are looking at it very carefully. A number of things arise, as you mentioned. But as we pointed out, a commission of inquiry allows hearsay evidence to come in. You recall the commission of inquiry into the Rodney affair. Because it's a commission of inquiry into a public matter of public concern, you have hearsay evidence coming in. There's no protection in that process, no built-in rules into the statute to protect persons from harm and reputational harm. So while information will be in the commission of inquiry, if it goes ahead, you cannot use that information in the court system. You cannot go with that information into the court. So we don't recognize and see any real value from a commission of inquiry running alongside a judicial process that will bring finality. We see it as an inference. So we're saying instead of a commission of inquiry, there should be more a concerted effort on GCOM to conduct an internal investigation, as it has done before, deal with other processes as to what went wrong and release that information to the public. I think GCOM will stand in better stead, in a better light. It will raise its own profile. The chair and the commissioners themselves will take this country to another level if it were to conduct that internal inquiry, having regard to so many accusations that were made against GCOM itself. So I think it is in the best interest of GCOM to conduct that internal inquiry and provide the answers to the Guyanese public while the judicial process of the petitions continue. So I see no value in the Commission of Inquiry.
Next question, sir.
Go ahead.
Before this commission was initiated, was there any discussion between the opposition and the government?
No, as far as I'm aware and the party is aware, there were no discussions and there were no attempts to have any discussions with the PNCR, and as far as we are aware, no discussions with our coalition partners.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead,
No,
Mr. Adamar.
if we're going to have a commission, there must be some cost. The last time I remember, commissioners, whose commissioner was that, received millions of dollars. Has a budget been disclosed? I see people have been selected and all of that. Do we know what they will earn? And paying such sums to foreign investigators, if you want to call them that, in the face of what is being faced by Guyanese. How is the party prepared to react to this?
But we wish not to cast any aspersions on the commissioners so identified, the goodly gentlemen, as identified by the president. That's not our purpose. What we'll say is that we believe in this time of economic crisis within the country, the time of high cost of living and rapid inflation, that any remuneration to these goodly gentlemen should be reasonable and should be indexed to the cost of living and the standard of living in Guyana. You know, in the Catholic Church, if you're a cardinal or a priest in the Dominican Republic, you live at the level of how those people in the Dominican Republic live. And if you're a priest in Italy, then your lodgings will be according to the standards in Italy. So I would say on behalf of the party that if those commissioners here should be earning something that is consistent with the level of economic development of Guyana and not indexed to any international standard. I think we would want to resist that as a party, having spoken so often on the issues plaguing our people in this country.
Thank you. Any other questions?
If nobody else, I would like to shoot another one.
Well, I don't see any other hands at this moment, so that's okay.
All right. Mr. Lowe, you were speaking about the subsidizing of the fuel prices. You said this the last time you held a press conference, and you're repeating it again, and you're saying that the Vice President says nothing can be done. Although the United States, as we speak, and Mexico are showing that there are things to be done. Have you attempted to ascertain, first of all, how much money in excess we are receiving from the high cost of fuel? And how much of this do you think the government should put in the system?
Thank you for that question, Adam. So we have done research, first of all, into the costs and so on of this particular program. We've also looked at the oil price. You'll observe that it was recently reported that Guyana's next lift may provide as much as $120 a barrel, maybe coming in at that level. You'll also recall that last year when the various multilateral agencies were looking at Guyana's growth, they were looking at a $74 a barrel oil price. So really the estimates or what has happened has been a shock, way beyond the $74. We're looking to at least bring the price down to $100 a barrel, so that gives you $20 a barrel of excess. But you know, when it comes to the vouchers and so on for transportation, transportation of goods from the farm to market, that is an area we would look at a lower price even. Of course, that is because it has a broader deflationary effect. It will bring down prices, and that's really one of the things we're aiming at. So we've looked at the excess revenues. There has also been reported that we may see as many as 13 lifts over the course of the year for the Guyana government, and so that can give you an estimate of how many of the revenues that are available in excess of, one, what was anticipated, and two, what would be a reasonable level for consumers to pay in Guyana.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, I'm going to enjoy myself till they're ready. One of the points you made, Mr. Lowe, had to do with Mr. Jagdio meeting potential investors in his living room. Yesterday at the press conference, he said the meeting was foisted on him. And perhaps Rear Admiral Best could help here too. Is it usual for potential investors, regardless of their contacts and what have you, to meet with senior government functionaries in their own home?
Well, I think that is a great question. I'd say the first thing is it usual to meet with them in their home? Is it usual to meet with them in private? It doesn't seem to me that there are a lot of people around. To my understanding, there are offices available to the Vice President that could have been used for any official business endeavors. So it is incredibly troubling that that meeting took place in his home. Additionally, we have often said the PPP is about enriching its friends and family. Well, you'll recall that in the interview, the Vice President says, "Sue is my friend." He gets the support. I would ask the Vice President what law empowers him to provide government support to someone because he is his friend. I am not aware of that law, but I'd be happy to be made aware of it.
Thank you. All right.
Rear Admiral?
Yes, Adam.
I know it's your neighbor.
Yes, you did mention, yes, you mentioned my name. Adam, I think that the Sioux Gate will make the rounds and continue to make the rounds because it's a very important matter fastened on the national conscience of the Guyanese people. I think it will be around for quite some time. At the level of the party, our focus is broad and not only specific just to the Sioux Gate. As I look back at it, it is indeed quite worrying that one will want to conduct the Vice President business at his residence. It raises a number of questions, and those questions are in the public domain. I think we need to press for answers to those questions that have been raised already. I think in the public, almost all the questions that could have been raised have been raised. What we need to press is for answers, and the citizens should be pressing for answers, and the Vice President has to account for being the holder of an office, access to the nation's resources and assets, and how those resources and assets are distributed within the country. There is a cabinet procedure, procurement procedure built into the legislation. And once you're outside of that, then you're caught in trouble and you're caught in danger. And I think that's exactly what is happening in this case. So we call for an independent investigation of the matter. So we will reiterate that call. We also call for the Vice President to resign his position or the President to remove him so that we can have an impartial investigation. So there are options that have been given to the government and the Vice President. He can set aside himself and allow an independent inquiry. The PNCR will frown, however, if there is an independent investigation and the Vice President is still holding that office. Because if the tables were the opposite, they would have been calling for the person to step aside to have an independent investigation.
Next question quickly, sir. You live in the same compound. Did you have a relationship with Mr. Su? Do you know him? Have you ever had a chance to even meet with him casually? And is it unusual for a very senior government official not knowing the whereabouts of a person, not checking to see perhaps if the immigration records would indicate whether Mr. Su is here or not?
Well, to that question, Adam will say, I don't live in any compound. There's no compound. If you were to put the question, I live in a compound, people believe there's a gated community with a fence, one entrance, and we all live in there. No, there's streets running in that area that I live, and my house is the very first house. I've said it on many occasions. So I do not live in a compound in any state. I do not know Mr. Sue. I never met the gentleman, for the record. So that would be my answer to your question. In terms of knowing who is there and who's in the country or not, there are procedures for that. There are procedures of finding that out. But let me reiterate that I don't live in a compound with other, with the vice president and other persons. There are 2 streets in that area that I live, and I'm in the very first house. And his is further down the street. So people come and go. And I don't raise eyebrows to see who comes into the street and go out to the street. But I want to come back to the point I made that what is in the public domain and what is from Vice News raises a number of questions. And if it were Gary Best, then Gary Best would have been called to answer those questions. If it were Mr. Lowe, he would have been called to give answers. And likewise, the VP should be given answers to this country. He was elected by the people to serve the people, and it doesn't appear from the Vice News that that was being done at that point in time. So the onus is on him. And as we've said, the PNCR, we've said, the GCOM must speak to itself again and ensure that it does an independent inquiry into what took place in the 2020 general regional elections, so that we have 2 authorized processes going forward to deal with this matter.
Adam, I'd just like to follow up on that actually. There is no need, I think, for ambiguity here. What is troubling, and this is why we want civil society to speak up, is that there are specific things that were mentioned, such as the hydro project. The Amalia Falls hydro project was mentioned in that particular documentary. There is also mention of an oil company. We've got the auctioning of oil blocks coming up later on in this year. These are incredibly troubling things because they concern the future of every Guyanese. They're large-scale matters. And so when we call for an investigation, you know, Mr. Sue may just be the tip of the iceberg. That's why we're calling for an investigation, to get a better understanding of what exactly is going on. And given that, you know, things like Amalia Falls are involved, which is a project that has been plaguing the Guyanese people for, you know, about 10 years now, this raises a serious question as to whether over that course of that period of time, we've seen bribes accumulated regarding to Amalia Falls. Again, this is why there needs to be an investigation to identify the truth, because it would be an incredible shame, but this is the question, if the reason that Guyanese face both blackouts and high electricity prices is because all this time a certain person has been taking bribes. We do not know this, but we want to find out.
All right, thank you there for your questions. As we come down to the close of this press conference, I will ask once more if anybody has a final question, and then we will bring this to an end. All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining the People's National Congress press conference today, and I do hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon. To our viewing public and the members of the media, do have a wonderful afternoon.